Hello, everybody. Let's go ahead and get started here. If you are joining us from Europe, good afternoon. If you're joining us from the States, good morning, and especially on the West Coast, bright and early morning for you all. Thanks for getting up and joining us for this awesome content today. My name is Scott Aller. I'm the VP of Marketing here at Core, and I just have a few real quick announcements before we dive into today's content because we have quite a bit of it for you. Russell, could you advance the slide for me, please? If you haven't been to a Core Customer Insights webinar before, you're in for a real treat. Our goal for these is really to bring some of the really great minds and ideas from the customers that we have here at Core. We're fortunate enough to work with several sports and entertainment organizations across multiple countries and across multiple leagues. And sometimes we'd love to get some of the most effective teams together and just share what's working for them, what they've done in the past, and hopefully be able to elevate the industry as a whole just by getting more people access to that unique information. So today's agenda, we have some really great panelists. We're focusing on the MLS, two different teams, LAFC and Vancouver Whitecaps FC. We'll take them through how their data flows throughout their organization, what went into their platform choices, and then we'll dive really deep and ask them some questions like, you know, how are you using it for sponsorship versus ticketing, and how do having a CRM system in place for both of those organizations cross-collaborate, and how does that help lift up the organization when you have the ability to share data back and forth. If you have any questions throughout the entire webinar, go ahead and submit them at any time. We'll be monitoring them, and then there'll be a Q&A portion at the end of this. And if there's anything you want to share on Twitter, you can hashtag Core Insights. We'll be able to see those and revisit them as we go along. So your host today, Russell Scabetti, our VP of Product Strategy, is going to be doing most of the moderating. We also have our Director of Customer Success, Adam Groh, joining us today, who will be monitoring most of the questions. Sorry, it's a little early for me as well here in Denver, and just getting my vocal cords warmed up. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Russell, who will introduce our three speakers.
Thank you, Scott. Appreciate it, and thanks everyone for joining us today for today's webinar. I'm really excited to be joined by our panelists, joining us all from the West Coast, so bright and early. We have Ryan Bishara, Director of Corporate Partnership Strategy for LAFC, as well as Brett Broich, Manager of Database Analytics, also from LAFC. And we have Christopher Bromley, the Manager of Business Intelligence for the Vancouver Whitecaps. So we've got a lot of great content to talk about all around CRM for sponsorships, for ticket sales, really for driving the business forward. And so whenever we do these webinars, one of the things that we've tried to do more often is to kick things off with a little bit of an audience poll. So we're gonna do our first poll today, and then we're gonna jump into hearing from the different clubs and talking about the flow of data in their organization. So first poll for today is how many of the folks on the line use CRM for supporting ticket sales, sponsorship, or both? So I'm going to go ahead and launch that poll. And go ahead and take a second here and vote, and we do see the votes coming in. And we'll give everyone a couple of seconds to get their vote tallied before we jump in. Looking like a pretty even mix so far. We know we've got about a third of the room is using it to support both departments. A decent chunk using it for one or the other, and a handful that maybe aren't actually pushing forward with CRM in their organization yet. So pretty interesting. I think hopefully we'll touch on a lot of topics that are resonant across the whole audience today. So let's start. One of the things that whenever we talk about CRM, you got to talk about data. So we thought it was a great place to kick things off and asking our panelists to talk a little bit about how data flows through their organization, where CRM falls into the mix. So Brett, why don't we start with you, if you can take us through the diagram here we see on screen.
Sure, thanks Russell. So within LAFC, we have probably 5 to 7 external data sources. You can see those on the left. So we get information from the league office, our sales team is collecting data on the phones when they're talking to our members. We also do a great job of email marketing through Marketo, and then social media data analytics that we're collecting through Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. And then we also do fan engagement events where we actually go out and we meet face-to-face with fans. We put on watch parties, try to collect as much information as possible, and really gain a relationship with our fan base. You know, we don't have any players, we don't have any coaches yet, so the only way we can engage with fans is by hosting events and bringing them into the LAFC family. So all those external data sources then feed into our data warehouse where we can aggregate them, put them all together, and run analyses on, you know, which targets should we hit, what fans are we missing out on, which events you know, were successful, which ones weren't. And once we do that, we're able to then utilize Core and Salesforce and our CRM system to then create campaigns, push those campaigns out to our sales team, and they can go and hit the ground and generate, you know, upwards of 15,000 season ticket deposits of where we're sitting now. You know, the reporting features and functionalities and the data that's in Salesforce is then rolled out through reporting to our executive team. Our executives receive a morning report and an afternoon report, so one of where we're at and then another report of you know, where we went for the day. Those are automated by Salesforce, by Core, and those types of reports show our executives what our total COI is for not only this year but for, you know, the next 10 years. You know, we opened up a over $1 million experience center to bring people through and walk them through the LAFC experience, where they can really see, you know, what we're building, what we're trying to do, you know, a year from now once we start play. And then other reporting issues that feed down to our sales team would be consumer insight data, successes from premium seating. You know, if we have somebody from Warner Brothers who buys a suite or a loge box, we can then kick that over to Ryan and his team to say, you know, we're having some success with these larger companies. Maybe they can go and attack them for sponsorship dollars, something like that. And then as it feeds down for our ticket sales team, really Salesforce CRM, we use it for campaigns, lead distribution, ticket selling highlights. So if someone has a big day, we can call them out in our morning meetings. And then we also have a dashboard and hustle board reporting for sales reps, for goals and performance activity metrics. So that's how essentially data comes in, very raw, gets aggregated, and then pushed out to our sales team and to our executive team so that we can show results.
Excellent. That's great. Is there any? So we're talking about lots of different feeds here and the flow. Is there any particular piece that I think has been most critical or most used when it comes by the sales team to actually drive those ticket sales numbers?
I think it's really just the reporting capabilities. Everybody gets to see the activity every day and what they're doing. Outside of that, it's really the campaign management and distribution that Salesforce and Core allows us to kick out to them. It'd be a lot more challenging if we were just doing this in Excel or you know, managing those 5 to 7 phone calls and touch points. So it's really just the organization of the data that's helped us.
Got it. Makes sense. So why don't we, and then same organization, but different set of users. So Ryan, why don't you take us through similarly to Brett, the flow of data and the users involved to support your sponsorship efforts in CRM.
Thanks, Russell. Yeah, you know, the biggest part of it was we were building from scratch, and that's such a fortunate challenge to have in a sponsorship department, where often you have to collaborate with ticket sales and premium to make sure that, you know, you have a clean data system as much as possible, and we were fortunate to be able to work together from the beginning. So for us, the structure of our department and the way we collaborated was incredibly important to make sure that we kept the cleanliness of data throughout our system. So starting with just our structure really quick, we have our sales executives, we have the partnership development team that manages renewal, activation, upsell, and then corporate partnership strategy really runs everything in the middle and allows them to have all the tools that they need to be successful, efficient, effective, etc. And the collaboration of our junior associates and interns that help us make sure that all the little gaps are also filled that range all the way from undergrad all the way to grad school really help us too. So starting with the Salesforce piece, we really worked with Core well to develop out and make sure that our accounts and contact tools and platforms and dashboards were really, really clean from the beginning. So it would make the process for the sales executives inputting really clean as well. So not only are board of the sales executives from the beginning putting in very clean data because we gave them strong and clear parameters, but also in the front end, because we have such a strong team of junior associates, they're doing a lot of the front end research for us, and we're directing them on how to do so in what depth. So they go as far as to put in executive briefs onto contacts and all the way down to LinkedIn profiles and quotes and hobbies and you name it. So we're really thorough with our decision maker contacts and being as targeted and personalized as possible, because that goes into our outreach process. Then, of course, our sales executives are managing the relationship from that point, and as they outreach, right, there's activity that occurs, and that's where building out the activity through Core, the inventory, deal sheets, all these different tools, Service Console, Invoice Console, come in because those are the tools that surround the process of sales from start to finish. So for the sales executives, they're the primary user of the activity window, and it's really what drives all of our reporting. Without that, we wouldn't have everything that we have today to report all the way up to ownership executives and the full revenue team. So building those clear processes and fields that made sense for them from the beginning was really important. And then the inventory and the deal sheets, we support them on making sure that the inventory is always up to date, the rates are clear and thorough and as really in depth as possible. Work with the sales executives as they're getting a deal to a term sheet to build out the entire deal sheet, so it's very clear in terms of how the deal is scorecarding. Is it a good deal? Is it a bad deal? And how far above or below rate card is it? And then once the deal is actually signed and closed, we have the Service Console and the Invoice Console on the partnership development side that allow us to make sure that we're executing each of the different programs that have been built into the deal very thoroughly, and also that we're billing the client properly and it's as automated as possible. So that's everything within the core module that we used on top of the Salesforce part. And then as we transition to reporting, everything comes off of that. So being able to leverage Tableau and working with Core to kind of build out that process and how we were doing in all the data sources, it really started with the executive leadership and what they wanted to see, because in the end they're managing not only the organization but also the department. So being able to have a view that they were going to have buy-in from the beginning was crucial to make sure that our activity that our sales executives were putting in was valid, important, valued, and useful for actually making decisions on a day-to-day basis. So the combination of having a very clear pipeline for every kind of deal and every step of the process, every type of deal for founding partners, jerseys, naming rights, etc., was really important. Being able to forecast when the deals were going to come in was also important, and then on a week-to-week basis, being able to track the activity that the sales executives are making, and then also on a larger scale, more macro scale, how the reps or the sales executives were doing in comparison to one another, how many pitches, how many meetings, how much outreach, and to what kinds of companies, what type of decision maker, or was it an influencer or an admin. So all of that combined really provides us answers to every kind of question we would want to be able to manage and make decisions on a day-to-day basis for the department.
No, that's great, Ryan. I love how you've been able to unify everything from day one on top of the platform with your business processes, with your reporting, and it's very clear that there's a whole end-to-end scope that's being covered here. So that was really great background. Well, Chris, why don't we let's go to you next on the Whitecaps. So I know you support kind of both departments when it comes to the flow of data and how you're using different platforms. So a similar diagram, but maybe some slightly different bullets and different data sources. Can you tell us a little bit about what we're looking at here?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, we've been in MLS a few more years than LAFC, so we have quite a number of data sources. Obviously, being a Ticketmaster client, that's a huge data set for us. We were pretty much on Ticketmaster Arctics up until about late 2015, so I'm sure that's a familiar place for a lot of people. Using it as CRM, though it's not necessarily true CRM. A little bit unique to us is, and I'll talk about it much more later in the presentation, is we have kind of a unique position in that not a lot of North American sports clubs actually have academies and camp structures as much as we do. We have 22 camps and academies across the Canada. So we capture that data in FormStack, and we bring that actually into our core ticketing module as well. Excel, you're never going to really escape Excel. Also, just to kind of clarify this diagram, it isn't just one direction. You know, we'll be bringing information in and out all the time. We qualify our lead scores in Excel, and then we bring that information back in. So we also work with Turnkey Surveyor, so the integration that Core provides to bring that survey data onto the contact record is really valuable to our reps, especially in fan services, which is our version of ticket retention. And then Ski Data is also run by fan services as well. In addition to this, there's other data sets that aren't necessarily listed. The MLS Central Data Warehouse, both LAFC and us, gather data from that. Also, so we don't have a data warehouse as of yet, but we do bring a lot of information into to CRM. So our business intelligence and CRM team vets and make sure that we have decent data integrity throughout the organization. I won't touch too much on the granularity of the reports because I think there's a lot of similarities to what LAFC kind of quoted there. One thing that is really important to us, though, and I've noted it as the fourth point on the executives, is case escalation and case management as well by the bottom of our fan services. So we have built-in policy and we've built-in case management for all of those issues that arise in stadium or with any other fans, and our executives are really interested in that. They really demand important reporting on it. So that's something that's key to our data flow. Also, LAFC touched on it, but our full seasons equivalence tracking. So, we have just around 15,000 full season equivalents, so we want to make sure we monitor the health of that very regularly. We also have gone away from a yearly subscription model to a month-over-month renewal model. So our tickets are basically memberships that are bought in perpetuity. So, it's important for us to track the health of that on a daily basis because, anybody can drop those tickets at any time. So that's it for the ticketing side of things.
And
from the sponsorship. Yeah, so on the partnership side, we call it sponsorship, but so it's the same kind of idea. Basically, we vet most of the data there. I've added Surveyor there as well because it's kind of a lead source from all of the surveys we do in-house to capture household income and business users and things like that to upgrade to suites and sponsorship products. But the same idea, there's internal case escalation that happens through our sponsorship retention team to make sure that our sponsors are all happy. And then, again, we do the same sort of campaign tracking and reporting that LAFC do, making sure that we can manage those leaderboards and hustle boards effectively. We are a Tableau client before we started with Core, so one of the great things for us was there was a lot of familiarity with the executives in terms of that style of reporting and being able to work with those style of dashboards. So that was a huge selling factor for us as well.
Great. Thank you, Chris. And just to clarify that last point for those of you attending, Core, along with layering on top of a CRM platform, a little while back decided to integrate Tableau as our reporting layer. So to Chris's point, those that either use Tableau or haven't in the past now have that ability baked into their CRM system. So another audience poll as we transition here to our next topic. So if you do have a CRM, we'd love to know what platform are you currently using. So let's go ahead and kick off our second poll of the day. We'll give everyone a moment here to fill in this quick one. And we see some answers coming in right now. Looks like a little bit more on the Microsoft Dynamics side with some Salesforce as well. A couple of people maybe using some other platforms, not one of the big three that we I guess see the most of in sports. We definitely have some Salesforce in there as well, which is fitting. Both teams that we're talking to today had made the decision to go with Salesforce as their platform of choice. So we will go ahead and close this poll off now. And then we should let's throw it to the back to the panelists, if you will. What went into the system choice? You know, choosing a CRM platform is really important, and also figuring out if you want to go with a partner to tie it into the ecosystems that you were describing those diagrams earlier. Why don't we start with Brett? Take us through a couple of those key decision factors. Brett?
Yeah, I think numbers 1 and 3 are probably the biggest factors for us. Between LAFC and Core, we have the Core ticketing module and we have the Core sponsorship module that we work off of. So that covers obviously both Ryan and my department's needs. However, what we love about Core the most probably was the fact that they were willing to build and innovate with us. As we were a new team coming on board, we had a lot of miscellaneous needs that probably a lot of their other partners didn't have. One of those is, we didn't have a ticketing system when we came on board. Core was willing and able to build us a seat manifest so that we could go out and start selling inventory. In addition to that, when we were bringing people into our offices to do a virtual reality walkthrough of the stadium and where they would like to sit, we didn't have a way to schedule all these people, these few thousand people to come into the office, and so we said, Russ, Adam, what can we do? And they were able to build us a calendar and a scheduling system that really helped us, be more efficient with our day-to-day and more efficient with our ticket selling process. Outside of that, the obvious reporting capabilities of Salesforce and how it kept everything organized and was a little bit more, constructive and customizable to our needs is why we chose them over Microsoft or one of the other players.
Great. Thank you, Brett. Chris, how about you next? What were some of the most important factors for the Whitecaps when you were evaluating system choices?
Yeah, I mean, if I think back to 2015, I think I talked your ear off a lot. Back at the SEAT conference, I pretty much interviewed just about anybody in any league that I could get in touch with. So, the Atlanta Falcons as well, and Oakland Raiders, Detroit Tigers, tons of people. I mean, basically, we'd been burned in the past. Fool me once. So, basically, there's a lot of tools out there that seem like CRM, but they may more be in line with marketing automation tools than they are a true CRM. So we didn't want to make that mistake again. We ultimately wanted to work with the vendor, and going to my fourth point, we're a sports club, not a developer. So there's a lot of people we've seen doing tons of customization that I'd talked to, in Dynamics or other places without Core, and it seemed like a lot of work to maintain. So we didn't necessarily want to put ourselves in that position. We don't have a ton of IT infrastructure, so to the second point, the importance of being cloud-based was essential. And at that time, too, Salesforce was very clearly the leader in the cloud. And Dynamics has a cloud offering, of course, but I don't think it was as established at that time. And then the last thing, of course, is flexibility. So we were existing club. We already had a ton of data flowing into the organization, even if it is just in raw format. So we wanted to make sure that the APIs existed for us. So we ended up choosing Salesforce a lot because of the flexibility of existing integrations without having to pay to build those, among other reasons. But yeah, that was a huge factor for us. And then the last thing I just wanted to emphasize, and it really depends on where CRM, is at when you make that decision. But CRM for us, where it was going to live departmentally was a big decision. Is it going to live in sales? Is it going to live in partnerships? We decided to, and that's when we formally started a business intelligence department, was so that we could support that and be kind of Switzerland. We're an asset to the entire company, and we work with all the different business units. So we don't want to emphasize CRM just for sales over partnerships or vice versa. So that was anybody who's making that decision. It sounds like there's a lot of people who are already using CRM, but if you haven't, then that's a key one to kind of figure out going in.
Yep. Both great points by both organizations. I think regardless of the folks on the line, if you're looking to choose platforms, regardless of who you work with, I think some key trends or commonalities you see there is what are your organization's strengths when it comes to the technology and the BI side? What are the unique things about your organization that may or may not fit into something that's already exists? And what is the flexibility? What are the data systems? What are the key pieces that are most important to drive your business forward? Because they may vary from team to team, so making sure you align with those goals is going to be really important. And Scott, my colleague on the line, pointed out that I forgot to hit the share button. So let me briefly go ahead and share those poll results, so and it's just not secret to me in terms of what your responses were on that CRM platform question. My apologies for that. So moving on, now that we've talked a lot about the data flow and the platform choice, let's transition to how things are being used, because ultimately it's not just about getting the plumbing hooked up, if you will. It's getting tactical. It's getting things into the end user's hands. So Ryan, why don't you take us through a little bit of that diagram on the left, which I think is a pretty common flow in how CRM is used across varying situations and use cases.
Of course. So to your point about the plumbing and then being able to use it, right, we actually spent a ton of time getting the plumbing in order, even on the front end, before we even hired any one sales executive in the partnership, as an example. Even in premium and ticketing, we were spending a ton of time on getting all the nuts and bolts and the pieces in line. But once we did, we were really thankful that we took that much time to onboard with you guys, et cetera, because the output was efficient. Not only were we able to generate reports from the beginning that were useful to quickly make decisions about what categories we're targeting and how effective we were being in those categories, how many meetings versus outreach we were doing, and to what quality of decision maker. All those things were different business insights we were able to start tracking from day one, and then be able to make recommendations. So spending less time on just getting the reports out and putting them together, and more actually reading them, digesting them, analyzing them, and then those recommendations, which is really what funnels into the executive decision making, and then the cross-organization intelligence, so that the executive team can support our sales process as well. And then on the ticket sales and premium side of things, they also know what we're doing, when we're doing, and potentially can support or complement where possible.
Great, and I think we actually, you were nice enough to share an example of one of those reports that you were talking about in context. Can you tell us a little bit about what we're looking at here in terms of your activity report and scorecard and how this is used?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're tracking our goals from a sales executive standpoint on a monthly basis. We focus on 3 specific parts of the sales process, one being outreach via a variety of mechanisms which are listed in our definitions. Then meetings. Again, a meeting could be in person, it could be a conference call, it could be off-site. So we track those, and then same with pitches as well, because that's really what you're trying to get through the sales process. We weigh them accordingly, and then make sure that for the scoring part of it, that no one weight is going to over-index. So if someone does 10 times the amount of outreach that they should be, doesn't mean that their score for the month should be overweighted because of that one part of the process they were doing. They can't skip out on any part of it. So we track that on a monthly basis. And then at the same time, if you look more to the bottom, we're also tracking who those appointments and outreaches were to, so that we can see, again, the quantity and kind of percentage of outreach to both decision makers, influencers, admin, et cetera, and then we can manage accordingly, dive into depth on who those were, so then we can try to affect behavior from the sales executive standpoint real time. So that's a quick overview of how we analyze and manage to our activity for sales executives.
No, this is great. It's a different twist on, I think, what a lot of people wrap up under like a hustle board style report. But you talk about putting on those different weights to be able to align with your organizational priorities, and then taking that one step further into the roles and who the conversations are with in more detail to really evaluate your effectiveness and what that leads to. I think this is a really strong approach to getting a lot more insight out of maybe a traditional activity metric. So really interesting. Chris, so let's talk about some of the ways you're using CRM. You've got a few different items here on the right to point out the ones that I think have been most important to you in terms of your system usage.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's mostly laid out in a 30,000-foot format, and it sounds like we've got a lot of familiar CRM users on the line. But so I won't kind of go through everything. But ultimately, as LAFC was saying, tracking and recommendations, it just makes it essential being able to move into core CRM versus when we were in Arctics. I mean, part of the reason and part of the challenge with that environment was tracking. You could distribute the leads, but how are they actually performing? You're living in an Excel hell in order to kind of figure that out. So, being able to kind of take yourself away from that, where you have the reports automatically distributed, allows you to really focus more on the recommendation side of things. That's something that we weren't really doing. We weren't that level of BI yet. Also, I think jumping down to number 4 with the chatter groups and things like that, or the chatter feeds that we've worked with Core to put custom chatter feeds on our deal memos, so that we can track the approval process even without it just being set for approval yet, so that when my COO goes and looks at it, she wants to see what questions were asked and what the resolution was. It just makes it easier to see that when it's saved in a conversational format. A lot of that history, it gets lost, and there's ways of storing it in other CRM, but it's not really being valued or used effectively. And with the chatter groups, I mean, we really try and focus on engaging our sales reps, whether it's in partnerships or ticketing. So, how can we effectively get them to be our analysts as well? We're not to say I'm crowdsourcing my job. I'd be out of one if I did that fully. But yeah, we want to try and engage people as much as possible. So, and then to our last point, I'll go to CASL compliance. People probably aren't familiar with that. That's the Canadian anti-spam legislation. So that's a really key important piece for us. So being able to track whether or not we're sending messages to people who have opted in or opted out from receiving that, that's something that in Canada, if you don't follow and track properly, comes with some seriously hefty fines. So that's a key piece. And then lastly, the league actually has a license for Salesforce Marketing Cloud, which is a great thing for us. We made the choice to go to Core before they even had that, but now that they've made that decision, that's fantastic for us. And so we're looking to build out those customer journeys, whether it's welcoming you automatically after buying your first ticket, or whether it's automatically sending an email to you with a camp survey the day that it finishes. We're trying to automate and create some journeys as much as we can with that.
Well, great points. I love the chatter as the way to really get something in the hands that's effective for the sales team. This is all the topic of the webinar is, after all, talking about CRM to support those sales efforts. The compliancy, that might be a unique Canadian item, but everyone has their own versions of compliancy and privacy rules, so definitely key to cover there. And let's also revisit that pipeline item, because you also shared an example of one of your pipeline reports. Can you tell us a little bit about this?
Yeah, the first thing I want to say is that, you know, I've never heard the word plumbing used with pipeline before, and I don't know why I haven't, but I think it was Brett that said that, so thank you. I'm going to never forget that. That's like when you see the arrow in the FedEx logo, you can never unsee that, you know. So I'm gonna continue to use that. Yeah, this is a standard out-of-the-box core pipeline summary for ticketing reps, which is some of the new reports that you guys developed not that long ago, and we use this tremendously. So, you know, this is filtered down to a rep level by product, and we have a bunch of different products there, whether they're full seasons, half seasons, or partial plans, etc. And so I just wanted to use this as an example. This is perhaps where a sales manager might come in, and we try and limit the reps to, you know, just under 500 leads at any given point. And so, you know, a sales manager would come in here, try and figure out how many of the leads that they're working, and whether or not to warrant distributing new leads as they come into them. You know, it seems to here that there's, you know, a significant amount, 13% still unworked. So, you know, he'd probably get on him about that as well at the beginning. And then, you know, we can't do this because it's a slideshow, but, you know, he could very easily, he would dig down into the rep, into the data with the rep to then look at, you know, well, what stage in the process are those calls at? You know, how far along are they in the pipeline? And the opportunity size, you know, would show that a little bit as well. So the great part is you know, the reps and the managers are using the same reports in order to be on the same page, and that's something that, you know, when you're not working with live data, or when you're working just exclusively in Arctics, you know, the reports are coming top down. They're coming from our department. They're going over to the manager. Then the manager is going and meeting with the sales rep. So, you know, there's really not that way for it to be a bi-directional conversation. You know, for a rep to go like, hey, I've worked almost all my leads. I'm definitely need and want some right here. So that's been a key game changer for us with some of the new pipeline reports.
Excellent. Glad to hear they've been so helpful. Moving along to our next topic, and an appropriate one too, in light again of talking about sponsorships and ticketing sales. Talk about cross collaboration. You know, the common thread is that you've designed your CRM platforms and your strategy to connect processes across different departments. So Chris, let's start with you. What are some of the benefits that you've seen, in particular for your sales and service staff across departments from your CRM platform?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, one of the clear ones off the top is that, you know, when you're living in a space where it's much more difficult to define sponsors than in Salesforce, then you know, there's a lot of cross-selling that happens, and there's overlap, and you'll get people calling some of your sponsors, and they're wondering why they're getting called from your ticketing reps. So, you know, I know it sounds silly, but that's a really key thing for us. You know, we want to basically make sure that everybody's playing nice in their individual sandboxes. And then, you know, for us, I think I spoke to it before, and I'll continue to speak to, is the soccer development camps and academies. So previously we had a completely separate system that we were using for that, and there wasn't any kind of migration of data except in the large scale. You know, large herds of data would come over, and we would batch and blast people. So, you know, we would do a giant export of people who were buying camps and academies, and then we would do a giant campaign across the ticketing side. And so it wasn't happening, you know, in real time. It wasn't happening in a way when you're hitting the customer when they're most likely to take advantage of that offer. So that's been a giant thing for us. And then, yeah, I mean, mostly it's the same applies for soccer development as it does for sponsors, where, you know, we don't want to overwhelm that customer. So, you know, we're using Salesforce Marketing Cloud. We're using ExactTarget in there. So, you know, we want to make sure we're not bombarding people and killing our own lists by oversaturating them with emails.
No, I think that's important. I think taking that customer-centric approach really aligns with thinking cross-departmentally, because one person can easily be involved or have relationships across different business units. So keeping their interests in mind as you manage, you encourage that collaboration, I think is a very effective tactic. Throwing it over to Ryan, how is this collaborative approach using a single platform really been leveraged by the partnership and the executive team?
Yeah, absolutely. So one thing that's been really helpful, I think, just for Brett and I, is that we're both so embedded and ingrained in the culture of the sales teams I think there's various ways to have the structures within organizations, but one, being able to sit with the end user every single day and have that connectivity to really know how they think, all the way from the head of the department to on the ground, the sales executives that are making the outreach. That's so crucial. And also being able to have that same level of interactivity with the ticket sales and premium folks. Fortunately, we're all in one office together and very tight knit, so it helps to be able to hear and meeting multiple times a week already, to be connected on every single thing that's happening on both sides of the business has been really useful. So that's one big part, and then being able to take all the insights that we're getting from both sides and leverage them to put into presentations on either side that support our sales efforts is really impactful. Everything from small things like, as we're building an organization from scratch, our deposit count and premium sell-through inventory, but all of those things help us tell a story about why our brands that are talking to us have to get in now. And so that's been incredibly effective. And so everything from demographics of those people and the socioeconomic status of them are things that brands want to know. And so in working with Brett, it's been really helpful because we're able to be so nimble in the process to get insights that make actionable impact in our presentation.
I think it's a really underrated element of taking a cross-department CRM approach. The way data and insights from one department inherently feed and support the other and vice versa is really important, and something you can only do when you are looking at the entire company and building a system in place that supports all departments. So along with building that system, ultimately people have to use that system. So we've got one more question as we transition to our user adoption topic. I'd love to hear from those in the audience how you would rate your current level of user adoption of a CRM platform for your organization. So let's go ahead and kick off our last poll of the day. Give everyone a couple seconds as the votes are already streaming in. I know some of them will be not applicable if you're not currently have an ongoing CRM implementation for your organization or for these departments. So we'll give everyone another couple seconds here. Looks like the nice thing is, looks like we're seeing some pretty solid adoption metrics, which is great. We love seeing that. That's really important. I think one of the reasons why CRM systems often may not be successful is if there's a challenge around end user adoption. So we'll go ahead and close this poll, and this time I will actually share it, since I forgot to last time. So as you can see, moderate adoption, overwhelmingly the #1 choice, which makes sense because oftentimes, my guess is some of you that picked moderate adoption, you might see strong in one department and weaker in another and average it out. So of course, we'd love to see do everything we can with our customers to help move that needle to the strong side. So let's go ahead and ask our panelists. How do you drive user adoption? What's been most effective for your end users, particularly around maybe sales effectiveness in particular? So Chris, why don't we start with you?
Sure, yeah. One of the key things for us was departmental champions, for sure. So we have a departmental champion in ticketing, sales, and retention, and so we have one on partnership, sales, and retention, and then another one in marketing as well, and then one in soccer development. And the key thing that I'd emphasize here is that don't just make it more work for that individual who becomes the champion. Make sure that that actual responsibility is put into their job description and their performance evaluation so that they're truly invested in it. That was key for us. And then also, the champions, while extremely helpful, they don't replace having a dedicated CRM administrator. So we actually have, having our champions be the first source of contact if there's a case that opens up in their department, and then they can escalate it to the CRM administrator. So, from there, if the issue is still big, it can go through to core or to Salesforce, but you want to keep it as close, arm's distance away from the people who are using it, so that there's always that person who's really close by that they can ask how to do it. The other way that they can find out information is we really encourage sharing and reward that in our sales department. So sharing of information on how to better use CRM, how to new ideas on how to kind of create more useful report views within Tableau. So that's something that we encourage within our chatter groups. And then the same thing I mentioned before with the one version of the truth, where the managers and the sales reps are actually looking at the same report in order to decide on how they're performing. Really key to have access to that when they need it. And then the last thing is something that I don't think, from my experience from knowing a lot of sports clubs, that sports clubs do well enough, and that's policy generation. We tend to move pretty flexibly and pretty quickly, but we don't always clearly define the processes and expectations along the way. So taking the time to actually draft out proper policies for everything from case escalation to how to properly pitch and use CRM for the partnership sales team is something that we spend a lot of time trying to figure out and come up with efficient ways of doing it. Ultimately, you can't expect people to learn it and it not to just become institutionalized if you don't open up that process and policy so that everybody understands exactly what their expectations on them are.
Makes a lot of sense. I think having that blend of policy, plus you mentioned one word I want to go back to, rewarding, is really key to make sure that it's not just policy, that there is a clear benefit to those users through encouragement and reward. Brett, how about you in terms of user adoption at LAFC?
Sure, very similar to Chris in the Whitecaps. We drive user adoption based off of visibility to management. So when reports are generated to management, in the mornings, I can't tell you how many times at 6:05 a.m., 5 minutes after the automated email has gone out, I get an email from our president asking, well, I thought we sold a suite yesterday. Why isn't that on this report? And our reps know that if it's not in CRM, then they're not going to be recognized by management. They're not going to get their commissions. They're going to be calculated off of it. Our reps know that everything that they do has to be put into CRM in order for them to get credit for it. Going back to Chris's pipeline activity, if we see reps, we have routinely reps come to us and say, oh, I need more leads, I need better leads, and we'll go and we'll look at the reports and we'll say, no, you have 100 open calls yet. And our rep might say, well, I made all those, I just didn't log them in. Well, it's right there we can see that he's not using it, and so we have to force him to go back, re-enter in all the information, and really drive user adoption that way. To our management and executive staff, CRM is where it starts and where it ends. If it's not in there, then it doesn't count in their eyes. So it's really how we've been able to drive user adoption is from the top down. We have a very data-driven management team, and they're solely focused on using Core and Salesforce and CRM to maintain all the reporting that we do.
Excellent. And Ryan, maybe I think this is actually to Brett's point about the reports that are automated that everyone gets and sees and looks to. I think this is one you had shared that's, again, back to an activity metric. Is this something that everyone gets either automatically or looks at all the time to see what those conversations are like?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is our last week activity view, and again, thanks to all the custom work we did in Tableau and the fact that, again, the process from the beginning was set up properly and the expectations are clear, being able to see every single day in real time activity as it happens is paramount to our reporting process internally. So as an example, what I'll do on a weekly basis is I take the highlights of all of the activities. So basically any meeting that we've had that's been of a prospect at a phase of, say, pitch or proposal level and above, and highlight any key activity that's occurred across the entire sales executive team. So that way, when we're reporting to ownership and to the executive team and to any other parts of the organization, it's always consistent and we're clear, and it's all based on what the sales executives are putting in. So they know and have the expectation that their notes are incredibly important. And not only that, because our group is also deeply involved in the brainstorm process, the pitch development process, and all those steps with the sales executives. Without these notes being accurate and thoughtful, sometimes we don't know the depth of the conversation, and so these things are also really crucial to making sure that our proposal development process is effective too. So that's real time how we're using it, and thankfully because it's automated, there's no excuse for anyone to not know what's happening on a day-to-day basis. No matter where you are, traveling or not, you should know.
Yep, like Brett said, if it's not in the system, it doesn't exist. So to have that consistency and access and transparency is really, really critical. We're about 10 minutes left in the webinar, so I'm going to, we have a couple more things I definitely want to touch on briefly. So a couple of specific use cases that I thought were really interesting. And we'll start on the LAFC side, and just with respect to time, let's just focus on item 3 here, which is around how you guys are using the fan profile to capture more consumer data. Brett, can you tell us a little bit about that? And I can pull up an example here.
Sure. There we go. The fan profile features allow us to gain key insights as we grow our database and plan for the future. As we said before, we're still building the stadium. We don't really have a team. We're coming on board next year. But these 6 to 7 key questions that every single rep asks, it's had an impact on stadium planning and development, ticket pricing, game day operations and preparations, and then most recently, conversation has turned to creating a family-friendly seating section. So you can see here on the left, the fan profiles questions are highlighted in red. This is a typical call screen of which our rep looks like, and then they go through as they try to make the sale and ask these key questions. Having them right there on the call screen allows the reps to remember to ask them, what's been asked, what hasn't been asked. And on the right, you can see some of the responses that we're getting. And down at the bottom, you can see who you're going to attend games with. Well, if we have 113 people that are using them for business, we can push those over to our premium seating reps, and maybe they can upsell them on some of our premium product. When you're building a stadium, we want to know exactly where people are going to want to sit. So which sections, which areas of the stadium are going to be, overutilized, underutilized, and that can help us set pricing. And then method of travel to the game, we see a lot of people, want to drive, but we have a limited number of parking spaces. So it's helping us prepare for game day and prepare our pricing and how we're going to, bring people into the stadium and really give them that driveway-to-driveway experience, which LAFC is trying to do.
Great ability to collect that small contextual data and the different ways you've been able to use that. Really interesting use case. Chris, we are, since the emphasis is definitely on the football and soccer today, I'd love to hear you tell a little bit more about that youth development initiative and your soccer development camps.
Yeah, absolutely. As I mentioned before, we do have the largest development program in MLS, 22 academies coast to coast in almost every province. We're even on the doorstep of our competitor, Toronto FC, in London, Ontario, and all the way out to Labrador. So, it's an important business unit for us. And we basically use a product called FormStack to handle those registrations, and I think they use BeanStream in order to process payment. We have almost 81 forms across the hundreds and hundreds of camps that we have at each of these academy centers. So, for us, it was key to be able to work with Core to help us understand and map the data from those forms into Salesforce. So this is just a little bit of an example of what somebody in our Southern Ontario camps might actually fill out, and then that data then gets modeled into Salesforce. We used to actually have a ton of data that would need to be passed in each form, and now we've gone a bit of a smarter route where we'll have a unique identifier for each camp that then gets referenced by another object within Salesforce. So that allows us to maintain only one object. Sorry for getting too techie here, guys, but that allows us to maintain only one object and keep all of those that camp's data, whether it's in what region or for what age groups, within Salesforce. And maintaining that has just made it so much easier than trying to maintain, almost 100 different forms and the back end of the data that's getting passed on that. So that was a huge thing for us as well.
Really, really interesting stuff, Chris. All right, the last topic here, we're going to go to questions and keep it to, I guess, 10 to 15 seconds. I'll start with Ryan. If you had one key insight when it comes to getting executive buy-in for this type of initiative, what is it?
Yeah, I think there's one thing, and it's really just consistent and reliable reporting that they can, one, understand quickly, and two, can rely on because they know it's accurate. So I think we've been fortunate in building that trust from the beginning, and now that we have it, they're used to our reporting, and they appreciate it, and that goes a long way to continuing to invest in what we're building.
Excellent. Chris, same question from your perspective with the Whitecaps.
Yeah, a unique one I'd say is basically aligning your proposal with your club's core values. So for us, that was unity, winning, and honor. And when you're working with multiple disparate data sources, that doesn't exactly represent unity very well. So when you're making your pitch, when you're making your proposal to management, find a way to tie that into the values of your organization to help. For us, in that case, it was to help break down data silos, but whatever your needs might be, I'm sure there's a way that you could map it to your organization's values.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris. This has been excellent. We have a few minutes left. Adam, our Director of Customer Success, you're on the line. Any questions from the audience that we'd like to throw out to our panelists before we wrap up for the day?
Yeah, we had a lot of really good questions. The two that really stuck out to me, I'll ask. So one is there's a lot of moving pieces in place that you guys have built these ecosystems with. Can you guys briefly talk about, this user wanted to know the process of getting these up and running? Like, how long did it take? What were the pieces that all had to come together to build these living, breathing ecosystems? And then also, once they have been completed, or so-called completed, what's the maintenance like to keep them up to speed and growing and evolving?
Great. Chris, do you want to start on that one, and then we'll throw it over to LAFC?
Yeah, I mean, for us, it's a constant evolution. Absolutely. There's a reason why we have a dedicated CRM admin, but the entire 3-man BI team really does support CRM. So it's an evolution that we're still trying to refine. We're still trying to build policies today. It's something that is a constant evolution. In terms of the timelines to get it back up, I mean, I was amazed at how quick the Ticketmaster integration went. I've gone through some with other organizations, and it can be a really scary thing, and it was probably the easiest Ticketmaster integration I've ever gone through. So, that didn't take very long at all. It depends on departments. With partnerships, it probably took a little bit longer because there's a lot of changes that happen within the policy there. However, with ticketing, we are a young organization and we have a really young team. So they were really keen from day one to adopt. Not that we had issues with adopting with partnerships, but they were really kind of gimme. So it didn't actually take too long to get things up and running for them. On the data perspective with FormStack, it took a little bit longer just because we had to learn to use that API. But once that was done, it didn't take very long at all.
Great. Ryan or Brett, from your perspective?
Sure. Really echo pretty much everything what Chris said. It's evolving every single day. I'd say when we got on board and get up and running, it took us probably just a few weeks for that lead time to get the system up and running, and then probably a few more weeks to train our reps and to really stay on them and sit next to them to ensure that they were entering everything in properly and accurately and they knew how to use the system. From that point, then it was Ryan and myself trying to figure out what did we need to create for the system, what did management need, and then going back to Core and Adam and asking, how can we do this, and then sitting down and really brainstorming and bringing those and baking those ideas out to bring them to completion.
Thanks, Brett. Adam, any other questions?
Yeah, and then to echo Brett's point, I think you made a good point. You guys said you kept working with the reps for weeks after the actual system was implemented, and that's key, I think, is continuing to train. A lot of times we go on site and we train, and then they don't do any training after, and that does hurt adoption. So very good point, Brett. Continually push training so it becomes more like muscle memory than just something they saw one time. And then the final piece is, or the other question, this is something I see come up quite a bit with other teams, is the reporting aspect of it all. You guys mentioned this throughout the entire presentation, is how much reporting drives your executive adoption. And I think there's bits and pieces in here, but this user wanted a little more clarification, is how is reporting generated? You mentioned some core standard stuff. Ryan, you mentioned some custom stuff. How do you guys really maintain and continue to grow your reporting to drive, again, executive adoption?
Ryan, you want to start that one?
Maybe Ryan, you want to? Yeah,
Yeah.
You've done a lot of customer reporting.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the first part of it was making sure that the data was right, and knowing what your sources are. So we were fortunate, again, being able to build it from scratch, but the key was knowing and having a strong sense of the architecture, what fields were going to be the most useful for the output and outcomes of what the executives wanted to see. So some of it came in the form of native Salesforce fields that we are more basic on the account and contact level. And then piggybacking on that, the fields that were built out in core, we wanted to make sure that those also synced up and there was a clear process from one to another. And then from there, Tableau is really what brought it all together, and working with Adam and team, we were able to take essentially those key fields from the relevant places and then visualize them. We originally started doing it in Excel just to model it out and showcase a couple examples so that our executive team and our leadership and revenue specifically knew what we were looking for, and that it was actually what exactly they wanted. From there, then it was just taking the time to really make sure that all the sources were right, the numbers were consistent to what we were getting if we were extracting data. And so after a few weeks, it was there, and then now it's, there's no maintenance after that. The great thing is once it's there, if anything, they're more engaged because now they're looking at it every single day as opposed to just once a week or however frequently we're reporting.
Great. Chris, anything to add on reporting?
Yeah, I'll just throw in a quick one. Tactically, I mentioned that we were already a Tableau shop. Our team's really keen on the product. So, having that expertise in-house and then continuing to develop that expertise in-house allows us the flexibility to work with the core Tableau server data in order to create our own custom reports from the data that we're bringing into CRM, whether it's our loyalty program or whether it's a different view for our individual sales reps reports. That's been a key thing for us. We prefer that style of reporting for most things, even over the Salesforce native reporting. So maintaining that skill in-house and then having somebody with that talent, I'd say was a key for executive buy-in.
Great. Thanks, Chris. Really appreciate it. And thank you to Chris, Ryan, and Brett for all of your content today. Really great stuff. I appreciate you spending the time with us and our attendees. And with that, I'm going to send it over to Scott to wrap things up. Scott? Go ahead, Scott. Sorry, I muted you.
Hey, there you go. Sorry. Thanks again, everyone, for joining us, especially to our speakers. Excellent content. There were a few slides we did not get to, so I will be posting a recap of this that will include the slide deck. So there might be a couple of little extra gems in there if you want to check it out at a later date. Maybe a couple extra little anecdotal information that you'll really enjoy. So other than that, if you are looking for us, we will be present at Seat London, Pro Venue Exchange, the Ticketmaster Summit, ALSD Miami, and Seat in Atlanta. If you're at any of those, please seek out some of our employees. And if you have any questions, you can always reach back out to us through a number of channels. That does it for today. Thanks again, everyone, and hopefully we will see you all again sometime in July for another Core Customer Insights webinar.
Take care, everyone.